Howdy folks, it's your friend Fishing with Dom, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the versatility of tube baits. Now, I live in the Great Lakes region. Tubes are one of the most popular baits that can be used in Lake St. Clair, the Saginaw Bay, Grand Traverse Bay, a lot of big smallmouth producing bodies of water. But I'm going to show you different ways it can be used. It's a lot more versatile than I once thought it was. Everybody thinks the way to fish a tube, you got the soft bait itself, you get a tube jig, you slide it in there, you jig it, and hey, you're good to go. Once you got the jig in there, you're good to go, right? No. The thing is with tubes, there are many, many different ways you can fish it. And I'm going to share a couple of those ways with you. I was doing a little reading not too long ago behind the versatility of how a tube bait can be used. And like I just said, I used to only fish them on jig heads. Until last summer, I started playing with them a little bit on a Carolina rig. I would rig them just like this on an offset worm hook. Carolina rig it, Texas rig it. This caught fish in many, many different ways, many different bodies of water, large or smallmouth bass. I was throwing it deep, I was throwing it shallow. That's what also really helps when it comes to this style of soft bait. You can fish it heavy and fast, or you can fish it low weight and really, really slow speeds. You know, they make 12-inch tubes for musky fishing. They make 7-inch tubes for saltwater fishing. They mimic a whole bunch of whatever fish could be eating. They can mimic different creatures that live on the bottom, like crawfish or mud bugs or bait fish. When I was rigging it weedless like this on the Texas rig, I was able to punch mats and into lily pads with the heavy enough weight. I was able to get down to where the fish were hiding. I was able to peg my Texas rig so I'd be able to skip it and throw it a little bit under pontoon boats and under docks and such. And it caught fish because it's a very, very subtle way to present something for a bass to gorge themselves on. You know, you could really jig it, you can hop it, you can swim it back to the boat, or you can move it really slow and let all of these tails do the dancing and the action. I've put these tubes in front of bass before and they've looked at it for a couple of seconds. Then I give it just a little twitch, they look at it longer, and then they just suck it on up. This is the Berkley Power Bait Power Pro tube. It's 4.5 inches long. This is one of my go-to tubes of choice. Long skirt, that's what I really like about it. Long, solid body, catches fish, and the tube holds up. Now when I'm rigging these for a Texas rig, a Carolina rig, or I might even try drop shotting with them in the future, I rig the top of the hook through the head of the bait, just like this, to where I can still tie to it. And I take that hook, and I just insert it into this pilot hole inside the tube. And from then on, I will push the tube up against the point of the hook, push it up, and pull it down a little bit. So that tube point is barely showing, just like that. So when they come along, that hook point's ready to do some action. So, rigging, give it a shot, you're going to like it. You throw it anywhere, fish at any speed, let the fish tell you how they want it. Now this is something I haven't done, what I'm about to show you. I'm going to do this a lot more. I've only punched and heavy flipped with crawdad imitators. But, after doing some reading, you can punch and flip with tubes. I don't see why not. It seems a little long, in my opinion, but after seeing a lot of people do really well and hearing their testimonials on it, shoot, just like any crawfish bait or any other bait you might want to flip, tuck this up into the reeds, flip it once or twice. When that fish holds down, that point comes through the bait. I like to use a razor sharp flipping hook. This is the Trokar TK130. Surgically sharpened, excellent hook, drives through the bone, you're not going to lose them. This is something I'm really planning on playing with. It's a little bit bigger. When you're flipping, I've got that heavy weight. I snell the hook so that way when the weight sits on the top of the eyelet, the bait's positioned upwards like this, and that skirt's going to be moving just a little bit. I like to flip in current and play in different situations. There's a lot of crawdads in the local reservoirs that I fish too, so I think this is going to be an excellent imitator on the rocks, and especially in weedy patches and mats along rocks too, where crawdads or crawfish, whatever you want to call them, may live and thrive. So in thick cover situations or in sticky areas, I like to rig my tubes. Texas style, Carolina rig. Like I said, I'm going to try drop shotting it, or I'm going to punch it into the thick stuff, right into the slop. I'm going to force myself to put down the crawdads and fish with a tube, like most people don't fish with a tube. So that's that as far as the rigging goes. As far as jigging, you can take your standard round ball jig and just fish it just like that. There's no wrong way to fish with a tube. I've come to notice this. I've said this is the third time I've said it. I used to think this is the only way you could fish with a tube, but the more you think about fishing philosophically, the better the results you're going to be, because you're going to know so much more about the baits you're using and how they work and the science behind it, as far as what the bait mimics and imitates in the water. And just by rigging or jigging it, I can give off a minnow profile or I can give off a crawdad profile. Now, when it's on a jig head like this, the jig itself is going to give it a lot of action. I can hop it, I can power sweep it, I can vertical jig it, and all these split tails back here, these are going to give me some action. These are going to give me a lot of action, and these work really, really good for walleye, for smallmouth bass, you name it. The thing is, when you're using a jig head, make sure you use the right size jig head. If you're fishing weeds, try to go as light as possible, because this will bury down in the weeds and you're going to end up with a lot of gunk caught up on your hook point. And the traditional way of rigging a tube, just like this with the interior style of jig, you can cover a lot of water with it. This is a fantastic bait on a lot of Great Lakes area water. Lake St. Clair, I've said this in one of my more recent podcasts, it's a large bowl of sand filled with water. You want to cover, there's no structure out there. I'm going to go throw this along the channel, I'm going to go throw this in the bays, I'm going to drag it, I'm going to hop it, I'm going to put a smaller weight in there, I'm going to swim it back to the boat. There's a lot of different ways you could fish a tube, and that's why they've been so popular over the past 10 years. They catch fish, and there's so many different ways you can fish with them. You can get ounce jig heads and vertically fish for bass or even walleye in 60 foot of water or so. You fish them deep, fish them low, fish them fast, fish them slow. Oh, goodness gracious. Tubes, I haven't fished with them all that much until years past when I started fishing the Saginaw Bay for smallmouth bass. And I prefer the tube over a lot of different baits some guys use on the Great Lakes. A lot of guys for bass, a lot of guys have been big into drop shotting. The tube, I'm able to crack it. I'm able to fish it in the cold water, the hot water. You can ice fish tube baits for lake trout during the ice fishing season, the winter months too. This is a very, very popular bait for lake trout anglers across Canada and the United States. But it's 2018. Let this be the year of you doing something a little bit out of your comfort zone. And by that, try fishing something differently. Put a tube on a jig head. Punch with a tube bait. Texas rig a tube bait. Or it doesn't even have to be anything with tube baits. It could be anything you want as far as fishing. Try something a little bit different. You might be onto something. You never know. There's so many different variations between how we present our bait and what the fish want. When it comes down to the point, when you're fishing with a tube bait, there's a good chance you can catch anything on it because it mimics bait fish. It mimics creatures and crawfish, and there's no wrong way to fish with it. Jig it, burn it back, hop it, let the fish tell you what they want. Fish it around rocks, fish it in weeds, fish it in sand. You can do a lot of things with the tube. Give it a shot. I did. I've certainly had a lot of luck with it throughout the entire year as far as catching fish, and you definitely will too. Now, there's a few different ways you can alter your tube jig. If you want a real tight wobble, when this bait is going down into the water with a jig head, you'd want your initial weight of your jig closer to the nose point of the tube. So you're going to really make sure it's jammed up there. And that way, when it's all the way up there and this tube is falling, it's going to spin in a spiral motion very, very, very tightly. But on the other hand, if you rig it about halfway through the bait, just like that, if you see the eyelet right there, when that bait is falling, you're going to get a very, very wide spin out of this bait when it's falling and moving through the water. And 9 times out of 10, bass will hit this bait on the drop. Absolutely on the drop. And let them tell you what they want. If it's cold, you want a little bit subtle action, I'd personally rig it up tight and up front. But if I want something a little bit big and boisterous, I'd rig it down there. So when it falls, this tube spins around through the water just like that. And that's just something I read on Bassmaster not too long ago. Shaw Grigsby wrote an excellent article on fishing tubes and his fishing experience in the industry. It's worked for him, and it's starting to work for me, so you should go out and try it. I think you should. We all need to fish with tubes more often. They come in many different scents, all sorts of different colors. Go out and get you some. But other than that, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or suggestions, let me know below. Thank you for watching Fishing with Dom. Take it easy.